Looks like we're settling in, getting our breakfast. It's a pleasure to see everybody today that's here in person and everybody that's joining us online. Welcome to the UUSF Sunday Forum. My name is John Maliska, and I'm a member of the forum and the Human Rights Working Group. I will be acting moderator today while Jeff Peckrell is away on vacation. We want to give a special welcome to new people who are here for the first time. If you would like to be on our notifications for these forum events, do sign up at the entry information table. We thank all those who produce forum, including the breakfast crew, which is David Heilbrunn and our sexton Thomas Brown. We have a great breakfast here at 9 a.m. before forum. We welcome you to join us. We also want to thank Jonathan Silk, our communications director. Before we introduce our program participants, we have a special announcements right here at 12:30 p.m. There will be a special literary event called We Don't Need No Stinkin' Fascism, Writers' Hope for Humanity. There will be a variety of writers speaking on this topic with short theater skits, music, and food, because we UUs have a better idea for our human family. Everyone is welcome. This coming Friday, from 5 p.m. to 7, there's going to be a special presentation here called Collective Liberation. It will have two peace activists who started out on opposing sides and now work for a common future for peace in the Middle East. They will talk about their shared journey from despair to hope. Please see the flyers that we have at the table. Today's presentation will end at around 10:25, and we will have time for question and answers afterward. So you are welcome to please write down your questions on note cards. And if you're on Zoom, we invite you to type your questions so we can read them as well. As we begin, I do want to share our protocols for the Sunday Forum. We are going to hear today about issues facing our world and provide a space to discuss with respect for all the participants here. Therefore, here are our expectations for this conversation. Please do not use language which is demeaning to the speaker, to the audience, or any specific social group. Please listen to and respect other points of view. Please write down questions clearly to be read and responded to by the speakers. If any problem were to occur, we will pause all discussion and determine the next steps. So we hope all agree to these expectations as set out in our society's covenants. Thank you. I'm now very happy to introduce Robin Larson as a member of our forum and the Human Rights Working Group, who will give our Ohlone recognition statement. Robin.
We, the members of the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco, acknowledge the Ramaytush Ohlone people, who are the ancestral custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Ramaytush Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, the land that our society rests upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We recognize that as the original stewards of this land, the Ohlone and other indigenous peoples have understood the interconnectedness of all life and maintained harmony with all of nature for millennia. We honor and thank them now for their enduring commitment to our Mother Earth.
Today, members of our congregation will be giving a report back on new Unitarian Universalist Association bylaws at the annual National UUA General Assembly, where they voted and approved 3 actions of immediate witness, which are actions and work to be undertaken this year by our UU members. All are described in the program provided. Today, we are very grateful to the members that participated in General Assembly. They are Gregory Stevens, who is founder of the UU Eco-Socialist Network. We will also be hearing from Bob Bacon, who is an attorney and a former member of the Board of Trustees. We will also be hearing from Dolores Perez Heilbrunn, who is co-chair of the Human Rights Working Group. And we will also be hearing from Brescia Younger, a new member who is very involved in our activism. At this stage, it is my pleasure to introduce Robert Bacon.
Thanks a lot, John, for the invitation. It's good to be here and good to be talking about the General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Okay. All right. Is that better? All right. This is our annual convention where several thousand Unitarian Universalists gather. The UUA is an association of congregations. Every congregation is entitled to be represented at the General Assembly. There are no intermediate levels of hierarchy. I've had the pleasure of attending about 25 General Assemblies over the years. They're held each year in the latter part of June. They serve 2 important purposes. One is to govern the association, and another that is about as a place for people to gather with what we like to call our people. Traditionally, everybody came together under one roof, one very large roof of a convention center. People began to realize that presented resource issues, which in turn presented representation issues. The people who gathered under that roof were considerably older, whiter, and richer than the people who gathered in our congregations every week. So about 10 years ago, the hybrid General Assembly began with the option of participating online from home or from your local church. Number of people who have participated in that has steadily grown over the years as the technology for making it feasible has improved. Unfortunately, during the COVID years, we had to be entirely virtual. And after 2 hybrid years, the unfortunate decision was made for the 2024 General Assembly again to be entirely virtual, even though health reasons did not require that. The problem with that is that while we can govern with the online technology, we can't gather very well that way. The General Assembly is an occasion for people to gather together with their affinity groups from around the denomination, whether that's people concerned about environmental justice, whether it's people of the same ethnic identity, whether it's treasurers of local congregations, whether it's people who practice Buddhist spirituality, and hundreds of other kinds of gatherings that can take place at the General Assembly when we're all there together. We will be gathering next June in Baltimore, Maryland, with the online option for those who cannot attend in person. One last thought about the General Assembly. Of all the communities that I'm part of during the year, all the spaces that I'm in during the year, the General Assembly pays more attention than any other to trying to be respectful, sensitive, supportive to those with marginalized identities, giving space for people to be their authentic selves. Of all the situations I find myself in, the General Assembly is better at that than any of the others. It's not perfect. And sadly, later in the presentation will come back to one very sad breach of that ethic that happened at this year's General Assembly. Turning to the first and perhaps most important item of business at this year's General Assembly. Only the delegates to the General Assembly can amend the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association. One of the most important of those bylaws is our statement of who we are, our statement of our principles, our purposes, and our sources. The 1985 version of that bylaw has served us very well over the decades, has frankly become beloved to many, has resonated with UUs for over 40 years, with the 7 principles, the list of sources. A few years ago, people began to realize that since it speaks from the 20th century, understandably, it was written to speak to the 20th century, and it doesn't adequately speak to the very different world of the 21st century. So a lengthy, participative, inclusive process was begun several years ago to recast our principles, our purposes, and our sources to make them speak to the contemporary world. Involved thousands of people as the drafters sought ideas from everyone who wanted to contribute. There were events held in this congregation, not only among ourselves, but with members of the leadership of the commission charged with drafting the revisions. I had the pleasure in 1985 of voting in favor of the prior version, the first General Assembly I ever attended. Had the pleasure of voting this year in favor of the new version. Diane Miller, a former minister of this church, spoke at this year's General Assembly in support of the new revised bylaw, pointing out that she had been a member of the drafting committee back in the 1980s that produced the prior version, and that she was a very enthusiastic supporter of replacing it with the new version. This is important enough that it requires approval at 2 consecutive General Assemblies. It got about 80% of the vote in 2023, and it got about the same percentage this year in 2024. We set out 7 values with love at the center. The handout on the back table shows the graphic that is literally part of the bylaws, not just rows and rows of black and white type. 7 values with love at the center. The others being justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. How are you going to remember all of those? The acronym is JETPIG, JETPIG. Many other values were considered during the drafting process, left on the cutting room floor. 2 finalists that didn't make it were reason and peace. There's a brief explanation of narrative explanation of each of the 7 values as part of the bylaw. The sources were similarly recast. As we learn the new statement, as we learn to love the new statement, we don't have to stop loving the old one. We don't have to stop deriving value, deriving inspiration from the 1985 version. This is, as the hymn writer says, a freedom that reveres the past, but trusts the dawning future more. I believe Gregory Stevens is next to talk about a couple of the other actions from this year's General Assembly.
Wonderful. Earlier this week, my nephew's soccer game got canceled because of a hurricane that completely obliterated Tampa, Florida, where they're from. The beach that I usually vacation from and bring a little vial of water for water communion is no longer, the condo is no longer there. Climate change is not something that's going to happen. It's happening. And there's not a lot that's being done about it. The current administration has signed off on more oil leases than any administration before. And we've also produced more oil than we ever have in human history this cycle, this past 4 years. But Unitarian Universalists are at least trying the best they can to do something about that. And so this action of immediate witness, I'm actually in contact with Robert, who was one of the lead writers on this. He also lives in Tampa, Florida, where the hurricane just hit. And he was emailing me about the evacuations that they were all going through and kind of the stress of it. And I was telling him, well, we'll be talking about you on Sunday. So our prayers and thoughts are with you. But so in writing this, what it says is that there's two things we should really take action on. Is we all know that climate change is real, it's happening, but what can we do about it? And so one of those is to pressure whichever administration's in power to declare a climate emergency. In declaring a climate emergency, the federal government can then funnel money into a bunch of projects that can help us adapt, but also mitigate the problems of climate change. Yes, it would be very good. The second one that we can, is something we can do in our own buildings. And that's kind of what I actually do at work is we go from congregation to congregation and try to turn them in what's called resilience hubs. And so a resilience hub is when a storm hits, the power goes out, but you at your congregation, you have solar panels and battery backup. So you can flick the lights on. So people like me who need their insulin refrigerated can come to the church and refrigerate their insulin. Or if I need to make a phone call or charge my devices or something like this. And so this space can then become like a light on the hill, you might say. My good friend Morgan lives in New Orleans, and they just went through the effects of that same storm. And there, I got all the emergency texts for their lighthouse system, and it worked really, really well. But in like the lower ward, all of these people lose power, and so these churches can then pop up as spaces where people can go and find respite. My friend Morgan, though, she said, you could have solar, you could have battery, you could have the fridge going, but you've then got a bunch of random people in a room and they have no idea what to do. So she's like, also maybe plan some games. But so those are some of the things that we can do. And it was overwhelmingly voted yes. So everyone's on support of this and we can really get behind it. One neat thing that's happening around too right now with our denomination is the climate revivals. So there's congregations all across the state right now this Sunday and Saturday and Sunday that we're teaching and reviving the idea of climate justice in their congregations and playing with the idea of a climate revival. The second action of immediate witness was on COVID. And it's been almost 5 years now, and it seems like something that we've kind of made it through. But at the same time, if you read the news that comes out of like UCSF, you see that there's always new upticks that COVID's constantly kind of coming back, and it's in weird ways. And so this is well written because it basically says we as Unitarians challenge the status quo, and the status quo currently is that the government is not responding appropriately to this. And so we should. And so in the ways in which we should are by continuing to have like mask affirming culture, which a good example would be the section we have in the sanctuary that's for mask folks. It's also, don't we have, Vanessa, a committee that focuses on this or like a group of people that have come together to think about COVID? Mm-hmm. And so that's another thing this is centering is saying that we're trying to make our space accessible, and some of our accessibility needs are already met. Some people's aren't. And so instead of saying, oh, I don't need that, we can simply say, oh, my accessibility needs are met when it comes to masking or something like this. And so, but the idea is that we're centering marginalized communities. And one thing to think about too is when I got COVID, but it was when the government was handing out those nice big checks for us. And so it was okay. I also was allowed to get 2 weeks off of work. Imagine though, if and I was working a really low wage job at the time because I had lost my union organizing job. I was working at like a press juicery or something. And so if I actually didn't have that money, I would probably get kicked out of my apartment. I would not be able to pay my bills, not be able to pay for my diabetes medications. And so when someone gets COVID who's working class, it could really spiral into something bad when it comes to finances and stuff. And so in trying to center this, we're not just centering someone who might be immune compromised, but it could just be a working class person who, if they get hit with something like this, it's going to wipe out their supposed savings, which they might not have. So I would say that with the COVID one, we're doing pretty good on it, but it's to keep thinking about it, to keep it at the forefront of our minds, to not forget about it, and to make sure that we're thinking about accessibility in a healthy way. And then the last one was on, it was a business resolution, which is different than an action of immediate witness. And it was to include the trans element of LGBTQ, and really uplift it. So in San Francisco, we don't have this problem as much. On my way here, I scootered through the Folsom Street Fair, which is going to be a wild event this afternoon. And it was kind of funny to see it in the dawn, or like as the sun's rising, everyone's, the dudes there. It's a very different event. But in the rest of this country, there are laws, tons of laws that have been trying to be written, bills and all this, that are attacking trans people, attacking their access to healthcare, attacking their access to just living a dignified life. And so instead of rant on this, let me read what was written, because it's really well said here. The imperative to care for those most at risk, especially due to systems of injustice, is one of our defining religious commitments throughout our UU history. These systems imperil the basic human right to experience freedom from discrimination in all areas of life, including healthcare, education, housing, employment, free expression, and beyond. Denial of medical care, basic human rights, causes profound damage and trauma, and is a violation of our core religious principles. Securing these rights for LGBTQIA people and communities whose rights are now at risk is essential for their lifelong development and thriving, the resolution says exactly. Our religious tradition is a living one, and today we collectively declare that our covenant inexcapably binds us to affirmation and protection of our transgender and intersex members in kindred in faith and in practice. The main thing to report back on this, though, it was a terrifying, there was, when it was like open comment, there were some very transphobic comments that were made. And there was this really, really beautiful moment, though, as the clock's ticking and a couple transphobic remarks are made. One of the ministers had 1 minute left, because that's how much time you get. And it was the last minute there was. And what's the minister's name, Vanessa? Can't remember. But she basically took her whole minute to say, I love you, we support you, we care for you. And it was one of these moments that if we were all in the room together, we were all behind our Zoom screens, bawling, everyone bawling. It was cool on social media. It turned into a meme in seconds, and it was all over Instagram and all over Facebook. But it was just one of those moments where we all came together and said, we love you, we love you, we love you. And we have no idea where that transphobia was coming from. So it passed, and trans people are wonderful.
Gregory, thank you so much for your speaking. Can we just get confirmation that the people can hear the speakers? Is everything being heard well? Okay. At this stage, we do want to welcome Dolores Perez Heilbrunn.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be speaking on the third action of immediate witness. It is my pleasure today to talk about this third action of immediate witness passed by the delegates at our General Assembly this past June, which is solidarity with Palestinians. Please read the full statement of this proposal available on the back table. It emphasizes the title of these AIWs that mean what they say, not just thoughtful ideas. The words immediate and witness demand action now. It is important to note these words taken from this proposal. Quote, we decry all the violence of October 7th. We further acknowledge that we cannot possibly repeat all the facts that led to this point, but note that Israel's occupation and repression in Gaza and the West Bank has been decades long. First, it is necessary to assuage any fears about the current activities on behalf of Palestinians. Our resolution does not in any way denigrate our support for the well-being of all Jewish people anywhere. Our country's long historical, generational support for Jewish people in the world was never meant to undermine the rights and the lands of the Palestinians. Unitarian Universalist communities around the world have issued calls for peace, justice, and reparations in the Palestinian territories for decades. In 1948, 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced, and at least 280,000 were displaced in 1967, when additional Palestinian lands were violently occupied against international law. UUA General Assembly Resolution 11 in 1982 and 2002 called for ending the occupation of Palestinian lands. The 1982 UUA Board of Trustees Resolution 6 declared that, quote, criticism of the policies of the government of Israel should not be equated with or confused with anti-Semitism, unquote. This last statement bears repeating. Since the AIW vote in June, the drumbeat of war continues and reports of new atrocities are unrelenting. We are facing an even greater regional conflict with new bombardments in Lebanon. Here is a comparison of this conflict with others. For example, the bombardment and destruction of Gaza has outpaced all of the Allied bombings in Germany during World War II. Recently, it was estimated that 70,000 tons of bombs have been dropped on Gaza, which is very tiny, surpassing the bombing of Dresden, Hamburg, and London combined during World War II. Because this bombing campaign has used mostly American-made bombs, it is incumbent upon us as American Unitarian Universalists to respond in true solidarity with the Palestinians. There are many calls by our congressional representatives for an arms embargo to the government of Israel. Since October 7th of last year, this conflict has caused the deaths and tremendous pain, both physical and mental, to civilians on both sides of this conflict. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, as of September 23rd, over 43,000 people, civilians, have been reported killed, and that includes 41,431 Palestinians and 1,706 Israelis, also including 134 journalists and media workers, of which 127 are Palestinians, 4 are Israelis, and 3 are Lebanese. And over 224 humanitarian professionals, including 179 employees of the United Nations Relief Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Near East. These figures, of course, are increasing by day, but include, at this point, around 17,000 children, not counting unidentified bodies on the rubble, 20,000 orphaned children, and nearly 80,000 wounded, including thousands of amputees. Incoming aid has often been blocked, depriving Palestinians of food, water, and medicines, and causing famine with starvation deaths in the hundreds, and 1.6 million in danger. The targeted and widespread destruction of medical, cultural, agricultural, educational, and religious sites is catastrophic. Our Human Rights Working Group Committee here in San Francisco has already been working on the recommendations called for by this AIW Solidarity Resolution, along with the National Unitarian Universalist Justice in the Middle East, the UU Service Committee, and many other UUA groups, with over 325 other national peace and justice organizations. We recommend that our UUSF congregation here in the Bay Area join other Bay Area groups called the Apartheid-Free Communities Pledge, and to sign, amplify, and carry out its goals to, first, call for the liberation of Palestine and an end to apartheid, declare our moral outrage and shared horror at Israel's massacre, mass incarceration, torture, destruction of the land and people, and poisoning soil for future generations, and decimating the system of care that supports life in the region. And another of the main goals is to call for an immediate permanent ceasefire, massive humanitarian aid, and release of all captives on both sides, and an end to the genocide around the world. We believe that in accordance with the current Unitarian Universalist covenants of our beliefs, we must live up to the moral and ethical values by joining the Apartheid-Free Communities Pledge, as stated in the proposed action of immediate witness of solidarity with Palestinians that was passed at our General Assembly. And now here is a statement from one of our members by the name of Brescia Younger. She's a Bay Area activist and member of our congregation. Thank you.
Greetings, UUSF congregation. I must confess that when I sat to write a 4-minute statement to present today, after a year of closely following what has been going on in Palestine, a year of endless videos of dead children, of blood-curdling screams, of humans maimed beyond recognition, of children collecting their parents' body parts from the earth and placing them into plastic bags, of amputations conducted without anesthetic, the white phosphorus bombs dropped onto children who scream out in hospitals as the chemicals burn through their flesh into bone, the thousands of now limbless people, the wounded children with no surviving family, the well-documented testimonies of torture, rape, and all along the Western media's and politicians' complicity. After a year of speaking closely with Palestinians in Gaza about their daily lives and the horrors they have faced and somehow managed to survive, as they have lost their homes, their friends, their family members, and as they grow skeletal from food scarcity, traumatized as they have endured repeated bombardment and continue to endure apocalyptic conditions. Watching the blatant lies produced on our media to convince us this is necessary to fight terrorism. After taking time to read books and watch at least a dozen films to educate myself about the history that predates October 7, after listening to historians and intellectuals such as Noam Chomsky, Ian Pape, Edward Said, Norman Finkelstein, Rashid Khalidi, and many others, it is an impossible task to convey what I have learned, what I have seen, in 4 minutes. History did not begin on October 7. It is well documented the long-term ethnic cleansing and colonization of Palestine. The Nakba never ended. The routine mowing of the lawn, Massacre after massacre the Palestinians have endured all predate October 7, although it is convenient to begin history on October 7. I have never seen anything more horrific in my lifetime than the countless videos I have seen coming out of Gaza from the journalists on the ground, those who have not yet been targeted and assassinated for attempting to expose the truth. It is clear that the Western media does not want us to be knowledgeable and informed about the genocide our government is funding. There is a lot of money being made for some off this genocide. The weapons manufacturing companies, AIPAC, and Big Oil, all connected to the genocide, and all funding our politicians. South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice for genocide. As a people who have suffered apartheid, they say that what the Palestinians have been enduring is a far more brutal version of apartheid than what they experienced in their own country. The ICJ has ruled that Israel is in fact an apartheid state, and that the occupation and colonization of Palestinian land is unlawful. Why haven't we heard about that on our media? I am changed forever by what I have witnessed this past year. How many brown lives have to be taken for them to matter as much as a white life? 186,000 is the conservative death toll published by The Lancet. There are approximately 10,000 Palestinian hostages being tortured in camps as we speak. This has been well documented by human rights organizations free for anyone to learn about via Google. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the United Nations Human Rights, Al Jazeera, and The Guardian have all published reports. I ask you, my fellow UUs, people of conscience and love, to please be courageous enough to challenge previously held beliefs and to do what you can to stand on the side of humanity. We as American citizens have a unique responsibility to stop this genocide as citizens of the country funding and providing the vast majority of the weapons to Israel, despite it being against US and international law to do so. The genocide would end swiftly without US support. There will be an opportunity to connect with and support Gazans directly and to hear their personal stories on October 13 after Sunday service in the Fireside Room. And this event will be sponsored by the National Unitarian Universalists for Justice in the Middle East. Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb from Jewish Voice for Peace will be there to speak, as well as Reverend Allison Tanner. All right, thank you.
I want to thank Bruce for helping facilitate that video from Brescia Younger, and we're very happy to hear again from Robert Bacon.
Good. Yes. I voted no on this resolution because it was only half there. It only did the things that Dolores and Brescia have just described, rightly calling out targeting of civilians, targeting of civilian infrastructure. But it was, by its title, Solidarity with Palestinians, not solidarity with Palestinians and Israelis. History did not begin on October 7th. It did not begin in 1948 either. While most UUs articulate these principles as our last two speakers have in utmost good faith, sadly, there are people who do not adequately distinguish the state of Israel from the government of Israel, and this resolution did not officially make that distinction that we must support the state of Israel and the state of Palestine, even as we criticize activities of governments. Similarly, there are people who support the Palestinian cause and speak of wanting to drive Israel into the sea, who are willing to attack Israel, who are willing to attack Israelis. And as we support the Palestinian cause, we have to distinguish ourselves, distance ourselves from them. And sadly, among the non-UU elements of the Palestinian movement, too much anti-Semitism has crept into the Palestinian movement, and we have to clearly distinguish ourselves from that, distance ourselves from that, and this resolution did not do that. Gregory mentioned that a transphobic speaker was rightly called out. There was no similar response when the speaker who was selected first to by the sponsors of this resolution to present it to the Assembly referred to Palestine from the river to the sea. The sensitivity to the trans UUs seemed not to be matched by sensitivity to the reaction by Jewish UUs. I come to this from the perspective of the prophet Micah, who was on the land long before 1948 and was one of the ancestors of both Palestinian and Israeli nations, that both of those nations deserve to live underneath their own vines and fig trees, with none to make them afraid. Following day, the Assembly passed a brief responsive resolution condemning the taking of Israeli civilian hostages by Hamas. I certainly greatly supported that. I was glad that it passed. It was too little too late. It reeked of afterthought after the promoters of the resolution just described did not permit it to be amended to be more expansive and more inclusive. So for all of those reasons, despite supporting the Palestinian cause, despite condemning the Israeli attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure, I had to vote no on this resolution.
Many of us did not get to attend General Assembly, so we're very grateful to all the speakers that were able to participate. We are very eager at this stage to read questions that have been written. Please write down your questions. Please write them as clearly as possible, and I will be glad to read them. And if they're directed to an individual, we can invite them back. And if you're on Zoom, we would be delighted for you to put any questions into chat. Why does action of immediate witness number 3 not call out Hamas for their role and responsibilities for the horrors of Palestinian people that Palestinian people are experiencing? Why call out one government and not another? Would any of our participants like to respond to that? Looks like Dolores would.
Thank you for that question. I cannot speak for the people that wrote this resolution. However, I do know that they were focused on the Palestinians who have suffered such a tremendously greater loss of life by any comparison. And they have been the recipients of the bombardments, and that's the huge bombardments after what happened on October 7th, which, as you know, I definitely said that we do not consider anything that written in this resolution to be anti-Semitic. And that's perfectly clear as far as the writing of this goes and what the UUA has said. The UUA has said in any discussions on this, we have to mention that most of the bombardments that have happened are on the small area in Gaza, and that the bombs are furnished to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, from the United States. So I don't know if that answers the question. Does it?
I appreciate you giving your response, Dolores. The next question. Bob Bacon, because you are so knowledgeable of the history of our denomination at recent General Assemblies, would you know about past resolutions at previous General Assemblies on apartheid South Africa? Did General Assembly make calls during the period when the US government was still supporting that regime? Did such resolutions occur before widespread reports in Western media of apartheid South Africa's crimes?
I don't know. I wish I had been given this question 2 days earlier and I could have looked up the answer. I'm sorry. That's the best I can do.
Anybody else with questions, you're welcome to write them. Anybody on Zoom, please type in the chat. Could you comment on Netanyahu's claim that his government supported Hamas because doing so would forestall any Palestinian state? Would any of our presenters like to comment on that? Dolores or Bob? Could you comment on Netanyahu? I guess it would be, can you comment on the claim about Netanyahu that his government supported Hamas because doing so would forestall any possible Palestinian state?
I think I'm trying to answer the question. All I know is that I heard that there was an investigation related to what happened before Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, and that the intel from Egypt and the United States about 3 days before this happened was reported to PM Netanyahu. For 3 days before that, he knew about it. And everybody is wondering, why didn't he report this? Why didn't he do something about this? And some of the conjecture is that he wanted it to happen because he wanted to cause chaos because he was being investigated himself. And if he was removed from prime minister, he would be charged in court with all sorts of nefarious activities. So that's all I know about it.
I am pleased to concur 100% with Dolores on this specific discussion about Mr. Netanyahu. Thanks.
The next question is, women's reproductive rights in the United States and the world were not addressed in this UUA meeting. Why not? Dolores or Bob, do you want to take accountability for that?
No, I do not know. I don't want to take accountability for that. All I know is that very many issues concerning what's happening in the United States, it was brought before the people that pick out the actions of immediate witness, right, Bob? And these were the three things that were chosen. And I don't know why women's right to choose, that whole subject was ignored. I'm sorry, I don't know. The UUA has Yeah. Yeah, Mary Castillo, who is very knowledgeable, just mentioned that this has been an AIW, an action of immediate witness in the past. I thought of that, but I'm not sure what year it was, but in the few years past, it has been considered.
Bob, would you like to comment on this or explain why you didn't? I'm sorry for making a joke with you. Mary Cecilia says that we've done this in many previous General Assemblies.
There's always far more proposals for actions of immediate witness than there would be hours for the General Assembly to consider them. A 5-member commission on social witness, which is elected by the General Assembly, among many other tasks, takes the first cut at these. They tend to favor things with particular immediacy. And given the choice between something that the General Assembly has not looked at for a number of years and something that it looked at last year or the year immediately before, it wouldn't surprise me if they made a choice to address a different issue in the limited number of 3 actions that there's time for the General Assembly to consider. It's just a guess. That would be my answer.
Thank you so much. The next written question is, I've been to dozens of pro-Palestinian actions since October 2023. I've spoken to many Palestinians and read many books and watched videos about the conflict. I have yet to see one single act of anti-Semitism. Could the speaker who spoke of anti-Semitic action Could the speaker who spoke on anti-Semitic action, one action or statement he potentially identify one action or statement he witnessed?
Not in person, because I won't participate in action on this issue that either flies only the Israeli flag or only the Palestinian flag. It's just that they would require both. Incidents of threatening behavior to American Jews on college campuses and elsewhere in this country are sadly widespread. And in dealing with this, just as we talk about with issues with trans people, we need to, or with victims of sexual violence or whatever, we have to view these through the lens of the people who are being attacked, and if it is perceived as threatening, as anti-Semitic by Jews, then we have to say that it is, just as we do with transphobic similar kinds of attacks.
I would like to mention that the forum is a great opportunity for us to hear from speakers that are knowledgeable. This is not a setting that's very conducive to debate. And I would hope on this topic, we continue the discussions that we've had at General Assembly in person to person and try to resolve how we can move forward being wonderful people individually and find a resolution. Dolores, would you like to say something more?
Yeah, regarding anti-Semitism that is supposed to be so prevalent, if you would like to submit to me or the Human Rights Working Group specific instances of anti-Semitism that you've witnessed, we will certainly look into it and report back on it. I want to repeat something I said in my statement. The UU General Assembly, Resolution 11 in 1982 and 2002 called for ending the occupation of Palestinian lands. The 1982 UUA Board of Trustees Resolution 6 declared, and this is extremely important, criticism of the policies of the government of Israel should not be equated or confused with anti-Semitism, unquote. And I said that it bears repeating, and I'm repeating it again because it's just a meme that's thrown out there, because I really feel quite sorry for American Jewish people. They don't know what to say. So then they just use that term supposedly to cover everything. And I want to say that I really appreciate all of my Jewish friends. All of them practically, not all, but 90% belong to Jewish Voice for Peace. And I hope you've heard about that organization. It's really wonderful. Thank you.
We do have another question. Was there any discussion of churches putting up ceasefire banners or declaring churches and congregations to be anti-apartheid congregations? Was there any discussion of churches putting up ceasefire banners or declaring churches and congregations to be anti-apartheid congregations?
I don't know. I'm not aware of all the discussions and what was discussed while they were doing this action of immediate witness, which everybody can read. It's right there. However, there are very many, I don't have the facts right here, over 400 Christian churches, synagogues, and Muslim churches, mosques who belong to the anti-apartheid movement. And if you want that information, I have it. So just ask me for it, and I'll be happy to provide it to you. Thank you.
I do have a question that I would like to address, but it does reference a document that many people find offensive and intolerable. So I'm going to try to modify this question. Is the Unitarian Universalist Association aware that the fraudulent document with anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, which I'm going to call the Protocols of, is the UUA aware that this is part of the charter of Hamas? And if Dolores and Bob would be able to speak to whether the UUA is aware of such a protocols document is part of a charter of Hamas.
Oh, this is a very interesting question. I'd be happy to research it. It seems like a very contrived and secretive thing that I've never heard before. I don't know who has heard about it, but if you submit that question to me, would you like to speak on it? I have never heard of anything concerning Hamas. The UUA does not support Hamas in any way. And I've never heard of this strange, contorted statement, but if you want to.
Bob, would you like to address this?
Sadly, I know exactly what document is being talked about. The Unitarian Universalist Association is 1,000 congregations, which together make up 175,000 people. The UUA as an institution does not know individual things. The best answer is that some UUs know what the questioner asked, and some do not.
Bob, thank you for that response. I want to thank Bob Bacon. I want to thank Brescia Younger. I want to thank Gregory Stevens. And I do want to thank Dolores Perez Heilbron for the presentation today of the actions of immediate witness that were voted on and passed by our General Assembly. At this stage, I think it is appropriate to have individualized conversations and end the forum. Thank you so much. You have an announcement?
This is a very lighthearted announcement. The choir has been invited to sing at the Warriors game, the Star Spangled Banner, on October 30th. And it's Pride Week, and we were chosen by the Warriors to sing because of our commitment to the Pride movement and to LGBTQ group. Anyway, I'm happy to. We have tickets, and the choir is. We did a what should I say audition last Thursday, and they accepted us. And so October 30th, if any of you are interested, there are tickets available. Okay.
October 30th.
October 30th.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you so much, everyone.